Chidi stepped off the plane at Heathrow Airport with nothing but a small, tattered suitcase and a heart heavy with dreams. He was 35 years old, unmarried, childless, and without a single soul to call family in London. But none of that mattered. He had come here with one purpose: to build something greater than himself, a business empire back home in Lagos. He had left Nigeria with nothing but determination, knowing that every sacrifice he made here would bring him closer to his dream. His younger brother, Wisdom, was his only family back home, the one person he trusted with his life. Every penny he made, he sent back to Wisdom, instructing him to buy lands in good locations, properties that would one day serve as the foundation of his success. But London was not kind. Chidi did every job he could find, often working back-to-back shifts with little to no rest. Caregiver for the elderly, he spent long nights in nursing homes, feeding frail hands that trembled with age, changing soiled sheets, and holding the hands of lonely souls who had been forgotten by their own families. The smell of antiseptic, the quiet cries of those in pain, it was exhausting work, both physically and emotionally. But he endured. Janitor at an office building, he cleaned toilets, mopped floors, and took out trash in the early hours of the morning when the city still slept. Some nights, he scrubbed so hard that his fingers bled, but he never complained. Every extra hour meant more money for his dream. Warehouse worker, the long, cold hours in a distribution warehouse took a toll on his body. He lifted heavy boxes until his back screamed in protest. The pay was decent, but the exhaustion was brutal. His hands, once smooth, became calloused, his joints stiff from the endless lifting. Dishwasher at a restaurant, he worked in the back of a busy Nigerian restaurant, washing plates until his fingers turned pruny and raw. Sometimes, the owners would give him leftover food to take home, and he would save it for the next day's meal, grateful for the small mercy. Construction worker, on weekends, he took shifts at construction sites, mixing cement, carrying bricks, and sweating under the brutal sun. The work left him aching, but it was honest labor, and it paid well enough. Chidi had no time for himself. No friends, no social life, no celebrations. While others partied and enjoyed the luxuries of London, he was either at work or sleeping just enough to survive. His meals were simple: cheap rice, bread, or beans, whatever could sustain him without eating into his savings. Sometimes, he didn't send money for months, choosing instead to save it all for one big transaction. One year, he saved almost everything he earned and sent it to Wisdom to buy 3 plots of land in a promising part of Lagos. When Wisdom confirmed the purchase, Chidi felt a small moment of joy, but it quickly faded. He wasn't done yet. He needed more. He needed enough to start construction. But doubt crept in at times. "Wisdom, are you sure you're buying the right lands?" he would ask over the phone, his voice tired but hopeful. "Brother, trust me. I am handling everything," Wisdom always reassures him. And Chidi trusted him. He had to. The years rolled by. Chidi was now 41. His body was not as strong as it used to be. His back hurt more, and his hands trembled when he tried to lift heavy loads. He wanted to marry. He wanted a Nigerian wife, a woman who understood the struggles of a man like him. But how could he marry when he had nothing to offer yet? What kind of man would he be if he brought a woman into this life of endless toil? So he waited, and worked, and sacrificed. But something inside him began to whisper, a quiet fear that he dared not voice. What if all his sacrifices amounted to nothing? What if Wisdom was not as careful with the money as he claimed? What if he was running out of time? London's winter was merciless. The cold bit deep into Chidi's bones as he walked home from yet another double shift, his breath forming ghostly clouds in the night air. His legs ached, his fingers numb, but he barely noticed. His mind was elsewhere, on Lagos, on the future he was building. He was no longer the fresh-faced man who had arrived 6 years ago. He was 41 now, his once black beard peppered with strands of grey, his body hardened by labor. Yet, he had no regrets. Every sacrifice was a step closer to his dream. Chidi's schedule was unforgiving. Morning, he worked at a care home from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., feeding and bathing elderly patients, listening to their stories, some of them too frail to even remember their own names. Afternoon, a quick break, maybe a nap in the staff lounge, before heading to the warehouse from 3 p.m. to 10 p.m., lifting, packing, and sweating under harsh fluorescent lights. Night, if luck was on his side, he'd catch an overnight janitorial shift from 11 p.m. to 4 a.m., scrubbing office floors while the city slept. Weekends, he took on construction work, earning extra pounds to speed up his investments. Sleep was a luxury. Rest was a privilege he could not afford. The money he sent home had grown. Wisdom assured him the properties were secured. "Brother, Lagos is changing. These lands will be worth millions soon," he said excitedly over the phone. Chidi smiled. "Good. That means we're getting closer." One night, after a particularly grueling shift, Chidi sat on his small mattress, scrolling through pictures Wisdom had sent, empty plots of land, freshly drawn survey plans, receipts of purchase. It filled him with pride. But then, another photo. A wedding. Wisdom's wedding. Chidi's eyes lingered on the image. His younger brother, beaming in a fine suit, his new bride glowing beside him. The celebration looked grand, expensive even. A strange tightness gripped Chidi's chest, but he pushed it aside. "Wisdom is doing well," he whispered to himself. That is all that matters. He had missed another milestone, but that was the price of his ambition. The call came late at night. Chidi was exhausted from a long shift at the warehouse, his back aching, his body crying out for rest. But when his phone buzzed and he saw Wisdom's name flashing on the screen, he sat up immediately. "Brother, I've been thinking," Wisdom began, his voice steady. "We need to change our strategy." Chidi frowned, wiping the sweat from his forehead. "What do you mean?" "The price of building materials has skyrocketed," Wisdom explained. "If you want to build houses or apartments, you'll be in London for at least another 7 years, maybe more. But if you invest in something bigger, something long-term, you won't have to work anymore. You'll be the one hiring people instead." Chidi's interest was piqued. "Go on." "A hotel." "Brother, if you build a hotel, the money will flow in every day. You won't have to depend on tenants paying rent. Tourists, businessmen, travelers, they will bring money daily. You can retire early, return home, and live like a king. The hotel will be of a moderate size, with an elegant design that is both functional and cost-effective, and it will not take long to complete." "A hotel?" The idea settled in Chidi's mind like a seed. It made sense. It was a bigger investment, yes, but the returns would be better. He could finally stop breaking his back working countless shifts. But it would take everything. "You're right," Chidi finally said, his voice firm. "Sell all the land except one. Use the money to buy a strategic piece of land in a prime location. We'll build the hotel." Wisdom was silent for a moment, then said, "You won't regret this, brother." Chidi threw himself into work like never before. He picked up more shifts, barely sleeping, barely eating. Every penny he earned went straight to Wisdom for the hotel. He deprived himself of love. There were British women who liked him, who offered him stability, marriage, and even citizenship. But Chidi refused. He wanted a Nigerian wife, a real African home. He wouldn't compromise. He deprived himself of comfort. He could have moved into a better apartment, buy a car, or dressed in fine clothes like some of his peers. But he continued living in a cramped one-room flat, taking the bus to work, wearing the same old jackets and shoes year after year. He deprived himself of rest. While other men his age enjoyed weekends, traveled, or spent time with family, Chidi was always working. His life revolved around his shifts, his savings, and his dream. He deprived himself of social life. No birthdays, no outings, no friends. Just work, save, and send. He deprived himself of good food. He could afford nice meals, but he chose the cheapest groceries. A loaf of bread, beans, rice, and water sustained him. No luxury, no indulgence. The hotel was built little by little. Sometimes, construction stopped because there was no money. Chidi would work extra hours, save for months, then send the funds to restart the project. Brick by brick, floor by floor, the hotel began to rise. Chidi barely noticed time slipping away. He had come to London at 35. Now, he is approaching 50. But the hotel was almost done. It was no longer a dream, it was real. A 3-story building with shining glass windows, a grand reception hall, and rooms waiting to be furnished. The signboard was already up, Royal Haven Hotel. And the grand opening was set for the day he would finally return home. Chidi felt something he hadn't felt in years, relief. It was time. With trembling hands, Chidi bought his ticket. A one-way flight to Lagos. This was it. No more sleepless nights, no more back-breaking work. He would finally reap the fruits of his labor. He would step off that plane as a successful man. He would finally find love, marry, and start a family. And he would walk into his hotel, a testament to his sacrifices, his struggles, his victory. As he packed his bags, his heart pounded with excitement. Tomorrow, he will be home. Tomorrow, his new life will begin. The day had finally come. The sun was shining over Lagos, and the city was alive with energy. People bustled in the streets, cars honked impatiently, and the warm, familiar air of home filled Chidi's lungs as he stepped off the plane. His heart pounded with excitement. He was home. At the arrival gate, Wisdom stood waiting. He looked wealthier, healthier. He had put on some weight, wore a designer wristwatch, and his car, a sleek, expensive SUV, was parked just outside. "Brother, welcome home." Wisdom embraced him tightly. Chidi smiled, his eyes welling with tears. 15 years, Wisdom. 15 years of sweat and sacrifice. Finally, I can rest. Yes, brother, Wisdom said, taking his bags. And today, we celebrate. The hotel is ready. Everyone is there waiting for you. Important guests, family, well-wishers, everyone is gathered to see you cut the ribbon. Chidi exhaled, his chest swelling with pride. This was the moment he had waited for. They got into the car and drove through the busy streets, passing by familiar landmarks. The city had changed, but it was still home. As they approached the location of the hotel, Chidi's excitement grew. Then, just a few streets away, he noticed something strange. A crowd had gathered. And in the distance, rising clouds of dust. The sound of heavy machinery. Chidi's heart began to race. Something was wrong. Then he saw them, bulldozers and excavators, massive and merciless, rolling forward like monsters with steel jaws. And they were headed straight for his hotel. Chidi barely noticed when Wisdom hit the brakes. He pushed the car door open and sprinted, his legs moving as fast as they could. His lungs ached, his legs wobbled, but he didn't stop until he reached the scene. There it was, Royal Haven Hotel. And surrounding it were government officials, uniformed men, and helpless onlookers. "Stop! Stop this!" Chidi screamed as he pushed through the crowd. He fell to his knees in front of the lead bulldozer, his hands raised, his face twisted in desperation. A stern-looking officer stepped forward. "Sir, step aside. The Lagos state government has ordered the demolition of this structure." Chidi's voice cracked. "Why? Why? This is my life's work. 15 years of blood and sweat. Why are you doing this?" The officer sighed, looking down at him. "Sir, the hotel was built illegally. The land was never meant for such a structure." Chidi turned to Wisdom, his eyes wide with disbelief. But you told me everything was approved. You said we got the permits." Wisdom swallowed hard, avoiding his gaze. The officer continued, listing the reasons. 1. The hotel was built over a major drainage system. Whenever it rained heavily, flooding would occur, endangering lives. 2. The land was mapped for a future highway expansion. The government had planned to construct a major road there, and the hotel was in the way. 3. The land documents were fraudulent. Chidi had unknowingly invested in property that had no valid approval from the authorities. Chidi felt his world crumble around him. He turned frantically, searching for help. He grabbed his phone, dialing every contact he had, government officials, police officers, lawyers, old friends. No one could help. Some didn't pick up. Others gave vague excuses. Then, the bulldozer's engine roared to life. Chidi's heart stopped. He rushed forward, throwing himself on the ground in front of the machines. "Please, I beg you, don't do this. Give me time, just a little time. Let me find a way to fix this." The machine operator shook his head. "Boss, it's not up to us. Orders are orders." Tears streamed down Chidi's face. He turned to the officials, the officers, the bystanders. "Please, someone stop this. This is my life. This is all I have." No one moved. No one spoke. Then, with a deep, rumbling groan, the first sledgehammer struck. The glass entrance shattered into a million pieces. Then another. And another. Chidi screamed, his voice hoarse, as the walls cracked, the floors buckled, the foundation collapsed. Royal Haven Hotel, the symbol of his sacrifice, was reduced to rubble before his very eyes. He fell to the ground, his fingers clawing at the dust. His body shook with uncontrollable sobs. 15 years. 15 years. 15 years of pain, loneliness, hunger, and sacrifice, gone in minutes. The crowd watched in silence. Some shook their heads in pity. Others whispered amongst themselves. Chidi's lips trembled as he whispered, "Is this the country I was supposed to be proud of?" He turned to Wisdom, his eyes hollow. "Where were you when I bought this land? Where were you when I built this hotel? You told me everything was fine. You said it was safe." Wisdom had no words. He stood frozen, his hands limp by his sides. Chidi's breathing became shallow. His vision blurred. He staggered backward, his mind a whirlwind of memories, years of suffering, of sweat-drenched nights, of aching bones, of dreams he had refused to let go. And now, there was nothing left. A strange calm washed over him. The screams, the dust, the destruction, they all faded. Slowly, he turned. He walked. No one followed. No one noticed. Step by step, he approached the edge of the nearby bridge, overlooking the deep, murky waters below. The weight of 15 years bore down on him. There was nothing left to fight for. He took one last breath and jumped. The water swallowed him whole. The crowd gasped. Some screamed. A few ran toward the riverbank, shouting. But by the time they reached, Chidi was gone. His body disappeared under the waves, claimed by the very land he had sacrificed everything for.